welcome to the Two Gals and a Mic podcast. I'm your host, Sue Kerver, and today I'm chatting with Wendy Dumke, a U.S. Army veteran, a mom of two, and someone who is committed to helping others move from negative spaces and places to positions of empowerment. Wendy, welcome to the show.
Hey, good to see you. Thanks for having me.
So, Wendy, let's start by chatting a little bit about your time in the Army, because that experience really has played a pivotal role in your life now. Tell us a little bit about why you decided to join the Army, what you did, and the places that it took you.
I was a straight C student in high school, just your average gal coming from small town Montana. Decided to join the Army to go see the world and was not a big fan of school. So I decided I wanted to go on to bigger and better things, and I really wanted to be a chef. And when I went to see the recruiter, I was like, I want to be a cook. Thank goodness the recruiter was like, no, we're not going to let you be a cook. He turned me on to being an x-ray technician and then sent me promptly to 52 weeks of training.
Why did you choose the Army? Did you go to an Army recruiter because that is who was in Dillon, Montana at the time? Why didn't you choose another service?
My grandmother was in the Army Nurse Corps. My grandfather was in the Army. My dad was actually in the Air Force as well. And in my family, we have a history of somebody being in the service all the way back to the Revolutionary War. So military has always kind of been in my blood. The Army recruiters were the most persistent. And at the time, it was the whole be all that you can be. And that really resonated with me. So I stuck with that one.
So here you are going from not wanting to go to school to 52 weeks of training to become an x-ray technician.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about what happened after you completed your training.
That whole adventure was pretty great. For an x-ray technician, you go to basic training, which I went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina. Then you go to AIT, which is at Fort Sam Houston, Texas. You have to go through medic school first. And then once you finish medic school, you go up the hill at the Academy of Health Sciences to go to x-ray tech training. And then they let you do on-the-job training. So from there, I went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And then from there, I was actually slated to go to Baumholder, Germany. And it just so happened that one of the other students who I was in training with was supposed to be going to Belgium. And her boyfriend at the time was going to Baumholder, Germany. And she asked me if I would switch her. So we switched assignments and I ended up going to Belgium. So I was pretty excited. And I got to Belgium and I was stationed at the Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe, so SHAPE Belgium, which is not in Brussels. It's south of Brussels in Mons, which is pretty much the most fantastic place to get to be stationed your very first duty station. It's an international post. There's people from all different international agencies and things like that there. My barracks were actually not all American and not all Army.
Now, were you single when you started this adventure? Like
Yes,
single, no kids?
single, no kids. Yep.
And how long did you stay in the Army?
So I was in the Army in total 5 years.
And then once you got out of this beautiful place and did the rest of your time in the Army, you pivoted. You went back to school for something that was completely unrelated to this medical field that you had been in. What was the journey like going back to school and starting an entirely new career path?
After I left the Army, I ended up getting divorced and moved back to Montana. And when I moved back to Montana, I had actually been working at this job billing for a medical company. And I kept seeing VA claims getting denied. And that's when I actually wanted to start going to college. And I was like so hell bent on becoming a politician, actually, is what I wanted to do. And I wanted to change the VA from the inside out. And I had all these grandiose dreams of changing everything from the inside out. So I was hot and heavy into political science degree. And I was like, I'm going to be a politician. I'm going to change the world. And then I took my very first gen ed class, which was a geology class. And we actually had an earthquake during the same week that we were working on plate tectonics. And that was it. I was like, this is it. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So I changed my degree and decided to get a degree in geology.
So as fate would have it, I just want to make sure that I understand this transition. As fate would have it, you're taking geology just as a science course because you had to
Yeah.
choose something, so you chose geology.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's an earthquake, and then you're
Yeah.
like, "Whoa, now I need to change my entire life course."
I was going to school at University of Montana Western, and it's like a really interesting system at Western because they do the block system. So all of their coursework is condensed into 3.5 weeks. You only take one class for 18 days. And at the end of that 18 days, you take the final, you get 4 days off, and then you start your next class. I mean, it just so happened that that earthquake happened in that 3.5 week period. It literally is just so serendipitous. It really is fate that it would happen that way.
So you get your geology degree, Wendy, what are you doing with that now?
Actually got hired at the Forest Service before I finished my last two classes. So I'm technically not qualified to be hired as a geologist with the feds, but I got hired on as like a resource clerk. And so I started working for the Forest Service, and I was super excited to have a permanent full-time position before I even graduated. And that was great because I have two kids. I had been struggling through trying to pay for school. The GI Bill doesn't cover everything. Struggled through it, made it happen, and started working for the Forest Service, working fires and doing all kinds of fun stuff with that. Started volunteering with the Dillon JCs, which is actually where I met my husband. It's a philanthropic group here in Dillon that does all kinds of fun stuff. The last line of their creed really spoke to me and kept me in the organization for a really long time. The last line is service to humanity is the best work of life. That really has resonated with me since I joined them. And I keep reminding myself of that every day.
And I'm glad that you brought that up because I mentioned in the intro that you're committed to helping others move from negative spaces and places to positions of empowerment. Practically speaking, what does this look like? What projects are you working on and how are you making this happen?
I'm going to back up. During my time in the Army before I got married to my first husband, I had several instances of military sexual trauma. Those often go unreported for a variety of reasons. In my case, those went unreported because I was underage. I was 18 years old and I was hanging out with a bunch of people who were older than I was, and we were drinking. Immediately, you think, I don't want to get anybody else in trouble. They weren't supposed to be sharing alcohol with me. I wasn't doing what I should have been doing to protect myself. And, all of these guilty feelings that were brought up. The last instance of sexual trauma that I had actually resulted in the pregnancy with my oldest child while I was a single soldier in Belgium. So imagine being in a foreign country at 19 years old. What do you do? I was trying to sort out how I was going to deal with all this stuff. And the person who did my lab test took me to the train station so that I could go get the pregnancy taken care of. And I sat at the train station and I just cried the whole day until they came back and picked me up. It resulted in the birth of my son. And I will never regret that decision, but it's life changing, totally life altering. At 20 years old, I have a baby and I'm in the Army. You get 6 weeks off after you have a kid. And now I'm struggling with the PTSD from this rape. What do? You survive. You have to. In the meantime, you're just trying to figure out what life is going to be like from here on out. I was lucky enough to be with my ex-husband now, who took care of me. He didn't even know that all of that stuff had gone on. You just have to do what you have to do to survive. So I have a real soft spot in my heart for people who have to go through these kinds of things alone and who haven't had a chance to deal with them. Just in the last year, I have been able to finally start dealing with the trauma of all these things that have happened to me. I've come to realize that 25 years of carrying the burden on your own is too long. It takes a toll emotionally and physically. If I can help somebody else get to that place where they can deal with it sooner, I want to do anything I can to do that. I had an amazing therapist that was able to help me that I got through VA. And I didn't even realize that you don't have to have a disability rating with the VA in order to get therapy. So I want to be able to share that with other women veterans and male veterans too that have gone through these things. One of the things that I really want to encourage people to do is to get help. And if I can connect with those people in any way, shape, or form, I want to be able to do that. One of the great things that I have found was that there are places that welcome veterans that don't have service connected disability into their programming, and it gives me an opportunity to connect with them, being able to openly talk about these things. It's disappointing and eye-opening how common this is. I find it refreshing to know that people are willing to listen. And it's gratifying to me to know that I can be that word of encouragement to somebody to go ahead and report it. And they don't even have to report it to an authority or anything. They just have to let VA know that they're struggling so that they can go get help. And that to me is the best first step. And from there, it's just like all these doors just start opening up.
I'd like you to tell us a little bit about Dillon, because this is not a major metropolitan area like a Chicago or a Denver. And then tell us a little bit about, practically speaking, how you're plugging in within your community to do this work you just described.
I've been working with Vibrant Lives of Montana, which is actually a little yoga studio here. It's just a little nonprofit yoga studio that does pay-as-you-go efforts, everything from yoga to all of their other activities, meditation, and they do some Kundalini yoga. They also do retreats. They have given me the opportunity to see my retreat idea to a reality, which is going to be happening this summer. My whole idea was to get women out in the woods. I went out on a fire assignment a couple of years ago and had to set up my tent. I wasn't in fire camp, which is where like everybody else is. We were set up just a little ways from the ICP, and there was like nobody else around.
Which is Incident Command
In,
Post for our
sorry.
listeners.
Yeah,
Okay.
incident command post. Yeah. So this is basically where the fire commanders and all the bigwigs are like making all the decisions and things. So it's kind of removed a little ways away from where everybody is sleeping and getting supplies and all the rest of that stuff. I got there a little bit late on the first day and set up my tent at like 10 o'clock at night in the dark by myself, and realized that it was the very first time that I had ever set up my own tent by myself. How amazing that felt to be able to put up my tent by myself. You know, I'd put up a tent a million times, but I'd always had somebody else with me, either girlfriends or husband or kids or whatever. And this time I was truly by myself. And then I was sleeping out in this beautiful forest in the middle of nowhere, Idaho. It was quiet, and I'm so scared of the dark. When I tell you, Sue, that I am scared of the dark, I mean, I'm the type of person when I'm home by myself, I flip on lights in every single room to get to the next room. I just started thinking to myself, this is really exciting for me. And so I started thinking, how great would it be to give women this opportunity to be in a place that's safe, to learn how to set up a tent and build a fire and cook a meal, basically car camp with all their own gear, like do all the things by themselves. So they have like a kit that they could just throw in the back of their car and not have to depend on anybody else, but do it all beforehand so that they know confidently that they can do it. And Vibrant Lives has given me the opportunity to make this whole retreat thing happen. And on top of that, it's going to be happening during a full moon in July. And so we'll get to do some drumming out in the woods and do a little forest bath out in the East Pioneers and do this wonderful, beautiful retreat really in my own backyard, literally in my own backyard. Dillon is 5,600 people. We're a tiny little community, and this community is so gracious and kind and just willing to help me live this dream and put it all together. And so we're going to make it happen.
You've had another recent outdoor first, which also happened pretty much in your own backyard in the beautiful remote areas of Montana. Tell us about that, because I know that recent first was also very impactful and had those feelings of success that you just shared about wanting to have your retreat have on women.
Yes, it was the most amazing retreat opportunity I have ever been granted. It's like a make a wish kind of thing happen. I was able to go on a Project Healing Waters retreat at the Stock Farm Club in Hamilton, Montana, which literally is just over the hill from Dillon. It's about a 2.5 hour drive, which in Montana terms is just like a hop, skip, and a jump away. They set us up with the most amazing guides and took us out on the Bitterroot River, and I learned how to fly fish. I got to hold a fly rod for the very first time, and my wonderful guide, Greg, taught me how to fly fish while Kendall, my boat buddy, sat in the back of the boat and just was the most patient, amazing, encouraging woman I have ever met. I caught my very first cutthroat trout, my first day ever holding a fly rod. It was so awesome. And then Kendall is just amazing, sitting in the back of the boat, taking video and got the whole thing on video. It was great. And then the next day, we got to do it again. And I caught 2 more fish. So it was fantastic.
So you're feeling successful and you're
Yes,
feeling empowered, but more than fishing happened during that
more.
experience. So tell us a little bit about how that experience of being allowed to have that experience that included nature helped and aided in your healing process.
The fishing was just the icing on the cake. The best part about this Project Healing Waters trip was being in a cabin with these 3 other wonderful women that I got to share some amazing time with and learn their stories and talk to about their lives and what they have been through and have that camaraderie. And it was like immediately this sisterhood was born. I mean, we were only there for a few days, and it was like lifelong friendships built instantly without even trying. Add on to that nature. We're out here in this beautiful country, just soaking up all the sounds of the birds and watching the deer walk across our little yard in front of our cabin, sitting out sipping coffee while we're solving all the world's problems and trying to figure out what are we going to do next. And really, we were doing just that. If you can imagine like all these brilliant minds coming together and just having like the perfect amount of caffeine and camaraderie and just collaboration all in one beautiful space, that's what was going on. It was just like the Big Bang Theory happening right outside of Hamilton, Montana.
And it was also one of the first times that you openly shared about your
Yeah.
military sexual trauma, because you mentioned
Yeah.
even earlier in this podcast, you had
Mhm.
held on to that burden for 25
25 years.
25
Mhm.
years. So
Yeah.
what made you feel like you wanted to share at that point?
I felt safe. I felt no judgment. And I felt like if I could share this with anybody, it was going to be with these women. And I felt like this is the time and the place that I am able to freely let go of this guilt and shame and these hard, heart wrenching feelings because I don't need them anymore. They're not serving me. And these women are helping me see that and feel that. If that's not the best gift that can be given, then I don't know what is. And Project Healing Waters, it gave me that.
One of the things that you've said to me is that we can collect all the negative and we can make it harder, or we can put it in a bubble and let it float away. You shared your story.
Mhm.
We've talked about the military sexual trauma, and you shared how you felt safe and empowered by this collective group of women who foundationally held you up. How else do you find positive in these very difficult situations? Like, what advice would you have for people who are looking to make that transition and to find the positive in the negative?
The best way is to share it. When you have something all locked inside, it just sits and festers. And when you're able to share that burden, then it's not just yours anymore, and somebody else can help shoulder that. If I've learned nothing else in this last year, it's that holding on to that doesn't serve us at all. The worst case scenario that I thought was going to happen when I told the ones that I loved, the ones that, that I was keeping this secret from all these 25 years, when I finally shared it with them, the one thing that I heard over and over and over again was, I'm so sorry you had to do this by yourself. I'm so sorry you had to do this alone. I was like, why didn't I share this with them sooner? I wasn't expecting to hear that from them, but I was really grateful I did. And it really like lifted it off of me even more to hear that from my ex-husband, from my son who I told, and he was like, "Mom, why didn't you tell me?" He's 25 this year and he's just about to have his own child. And when he said, "Mom, I'm really sorry you had to go through all this stuff by yourself," I was so proud of him for handling it like that because I don't know what I would have done.
Did your son and your now ex-husband not know that you had been
Nobody knew.
raped?
Nobody knew. I never told a soul, not a soul. I didn't tell anybody.
So did your ex-husband think that your son was his?
Yes. Yeah.
So just this year, your son
Just
found out
this
that
year.
his
Yeah.
your ex-husband is not his actual biological father.
Yeah. So I got to sit with that guilt and shame as well.
Wow. It sounds like he handled that news with a lot of compassion and
Yeah.
a lot of empathy,
Yeah.
and really with some sadness that he hadn't been able to walk next to you
Yeah.
in this
Yeah.
journey.
I mean, honestly, when I told him this year, one of the things that I was most scared of was waiting to hear, "You're going to have to pay me back all the child support," or "That was an awful thing for you to do." And I was ready to hear that. I mean, when I was going to therapy, I was preparing myself to hear those things. And when I told him, I was coming back from Billings, which is like a 4-hour drive back to Dillon. So I had emailed him from Billings and sent him my statement letter that explained like exactly everything that I could remember, and sent him a long email that said, "I'm really sorry for everything that I put you through and for tricking you into all of this and, owning it all." Oh, and I said, "When you get this, if you want to talk to me about it, please call me. And if you don't ever want to talk to me again, I understand." And he's a command sergeant major in the Army, active duty right now. And I said, I want you to know all of this information now, because if you have soldiers that are going through this, I want you to believe them. And if you have soldiers that are perpetrating this stuff, then I want you to understand how it can affect the people that they're doing this to, because this is 25 years in the making. I just left it at that. And I didn't hear anything back until I was at about Whitehall, which is about an hour away from home for me. And there's a period of 20 minutes where I still have cell service before I lose service. And he called me, and I was like, okay, well, I have to stop and go to the bathroom and then get some gas, and I'll call you right back. I hung up and I went and got gas, and I kept thinking to myself, okay, he's either going to chew me out and it's going to be awful, or it's going to be okay. But either way, in 20 minutes, I know like I'll either lose service and I can just take a break from it if he's yelling at me, or I can pull over on the side of the road and just let him talk. Luckily, it was the latter, and the first words out of his mouth were, I'm so sorry you had to go through this by yourself. And I just burst into tears. It was literally the most compassionate thing I could have heard at the time. And I needed that. I really needed that. And honestly, he's the reason that I feel like I'm able to talk about it today. If he hadn't taken it that way, I don't know that I'd be able to be talking about it now, because it is a lot of shame involved. I'm still ashamed of doing that. And I realize now it was a survival mechanism of a 19-year-old who had been raped, and I didn't know what to do. And he was somebody that I knew was a nice person who I had been hanging out with already, anyways. He was a safe space for me at that point. What do you do?
And you chose to not terminate the pregnancy, right? You said that you went to the train station
Yeah,
and you sat at the train station, so
yeah,
you didn't go through with
no,
that as an option, clearly.
no. Mostly because I was in a foreign country and I really didn't know what I was going to do. I was left there by myself and I didn't know what I was going to do.
But now 25 years later, you
Mhm.
have this amazing son who is part of your larger family. You've
Yep.
said that you're remarried. We've
Yep.
said that you are a mom
Yep.
of 2.
Yep.
So when you think about this family that you now
Mhm.
have, when you think about everything that you've gone through, when
Mhm.
you think about your new mission of empowering women to feel successful, what legacy do you want to leave for your kids? Not only from a mother's perspective, but on a larger scale.
I had been preaching to my kids for a long time. Just own your shit. And I felt like a big hypocrite for a really long time. And I feel like now at least I can say it with an honest face. It feels so much better to be able to own it. Live it. Live your life and take advantage of all of the things that your life gives you, the good and the bad. Take every opportunity that comes your way, because you never know what those opportunities are going to bring you. Uh, could be a group of fantastic women. It could be one person who is helping open some doors that you didn't know you needed opened. It could be learning how to put up a tent by yourself so that you can make it out in a car camping adventure that you didn't know you needed. It could be anything. Learning how to make yourself a pair of earrings. Take advantage of everything you can. I'll keep living by the last line of the JC Creed, that service to humanity is the best work of life, because I truly do believe that I can serve humanity and love the people that are on this earth, because I know that everybody that I get to come in contact with every day is in my life for a reason.
You've talked about the retreat that you're going to be able to do in the summer of this year. What else is next for you, both in the near term and the long term? Are there any big projects or dreams that you're working towards?
Yes, I've been batting around this retreat center that I really would love to open up. There's a property here in Dillon that I have been eyeballing and want to purchase. It's the perfect property. It's an old shop that this aquatic excavation place owned, and it's got a pond, and a big grassy area where it would be perfect to learn how to fly fish. And it's also a great space for a community center for Dylan. I have been eyeballing this property for like, I don't know, a couple of years now. It's been on and off the market. I'm really looking forward to this summer's meeting in Colorado to start working with Project Healing Waters, to start working on some women only programming to really help get women out on the water and be able to talk with them. It's a safe place for them to be able to not feel like they have to hide anything. That's really, I think, my biggest goal this summer.
So, Wendy, I always like to ask for words of wisdom. And today you certainly shared some very raw, some very real, and some very powerful messages. Do you have any other words of advice or counsel that you would give to people who are wanting to let go of those burdens that are keeping them shackled so that they can open themselves up to the life that is meant for them?
Just take a few minutes to yourself every day to think about all the things that you can just let go of that don't serve you. I think a lot of us hold on to a lot of things that don't serve us. When I was at the last retreat at Vibrant Lives, I had been holding on to the fact that I had cheated on my driver's ed test, the big driver's ed test, and I had been holding on to that guilt for so stinking long. And I'm like, why? I am a good driver and it doesn't matter anymore. I can put that in a bubble and blow it away. It doesn't matter anymore. You know, we hold on to silly things like that for a really long time. Just put it in a bubble and blow it away.
Silly things and big things.
Yep.
Yeah. Wendy, last question. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wanted to share?
You didn't ask me when I'm available to go fishing with you.
When are you available to go fishing, Wendy?
Anytime, let's go.
Let's do it. Well, thank you, Wendy, for sharing your trials, your tribulations, and your triumphs with us today. Your openness and your candor, especially about the hard issues, is so needed. So, thank you for your love and your light and sharing those in ways that are helping so many heal. And listeners, thank you for tuning in. The Two Gals and a Mic podcast would not be possible without your support. So be sure to share this episode and then tune in again next week as I'm joined by another extraordinary woman who is doing extraordinary things. I'll see you then.